The film begins with a tense and action-packed scene, introducing the audience to Riley North, a determined woman on a mission to take down her longtime enemy. The chase scene is intense as Riley navigates through crowded streets in pursuit of her target. Despite sustaining a knife wound, she persists and ultimately corners her quarry. In intense emotion, she pulls out her gun and takes her revenge with a fatal shot, ending her long-standing feud. After the adrenaline of the chase subsides, Riley retreats to a secluded slum area where she has been keeping a low profile. She climbs into a black van, determined to treat her injuries rather than seek medical attention. As she tends to her wounds, she opens a box containing a chocolate cake and is suddenly hit with a flood of memories from 5 years ago. As the memories of the past flood back, the audience is transported to a different time. Riley is seen with her daughter Carly, who is excitedly preparing to celebrate her birthday. Suddenly, they are interrupted by a woman named Peg, who invites her to a meeting with other parents, but Riley declines, stating that she has more pressing matters. Peg is offended by her dismissive attitude and leaves in a huff. Despite the interruption, Riley remains focused on Carly's birthday and encourages her daughter to go ahead and enjoy her special day. Meanwhile, at his workplace, Riley's husband, Chris, is unaware of the events unfolding at home. As they set off to arrange Carly's birthday party, Riley is informed by her boss that he will be closing the shop for the day to visit a sick family member. On the other hand, Chris is approached by his friend Mickey, who suggests a robbery plan, but he is hesitant and unsure. That night, as Riley returns home, she finds the house empty and discovers that Peg had spread false rumors, preventing Carly's friends from attending her birthday party. Determined to lift her daughter's spirits, she quickly plans to take Carly out for a fun night, promising pizza and a trip to the Christmas carnival. Before leaving, Chris takes a moment to call Mickey and back out of the risky robbery plan, citing his concerns for his family's safety. As Riley, Carly, and Chris set off in their car, they are unaware they are being watched by a man named Cortez. Meanwhile, Mickey's decision to rob the powerful drug lord Diego Garcia leads to dire consequences as Garcia brutally executes him. As Chris, Riley, and Carly strolled through the carnival, they were all smiles, enjoying the sights, sounds, and treats the fair had to offer. Little did they know danger was lurking just around the corner. As they made their way to their car to head home, they stopped for peppermint ice cream. But as they indulged in their sweet treat, Garcia's men watched them from the shadows, hidden inside a nearby car. Without warning, Garcia's men ambushed Chris and Carly, who shot them dead in cold blood. In a state of shock and fear, Riley ran towards her fallen family members, but she was also shot. Then she collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Fortunately, the police arrived quickly on the scene, and Riley was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. A detective, determined to find the perpetrators of this heinous act, was already on the case, scouring the scene for any clues that could lead to the shooters. As Riley was taken to the ICU room, she was still barely conscious, her life hanging in the balance. Days passed, and Riley's condition slowly improved, and she was finally well enough to receive visitors. One day, a detective named Stan came to see her. He introduced himself and explained that he was the one who had been investigating the shooting that killed her husband and daughter. Riley listened intently as Stan told her that Chris had planned to rob a drug dealer named Diego Garcia. But when he had a change of heart and refused to go through with it, Garcia found out and had Chris and Carly killed in retaliation. Then Stan showed Riley a photo of her and her family at the carnival, and as she looked at it, she remembered something important. She told Stan that she had seen the faces of the shooters. He immediately took her to the police station and arranged for her to identify the shooters from a lineup. A few days later, Riley was brought to a room where the shooters were brought in one by one. As they walked in, her memory flooded back, and she confidently pointed to the 3 men who had killed her loved ones. Meanwhile, Stan and his partner, Detective Moses, were sitting in a garden discussing the case. He showed Stan evidence in the form of a police badge at the scene. It belonged to a corrupt officer working for Diego Garcia's criminal organization. As Stan surveyed the scene before him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread wash over him. It was clear to him that someone within the police force was working with Garcia, a notorious criminal known for his ruthless tactics. Then Moses, his trusted confidant, reminded him that Chris had only been planning and not robbing him, yet he and his daughter had still been brutally murdered. Moses warned Stan that he could also be in danger if he continued to investigate Garcia, as the criminal kingpin had no qualms about eliminating anyone who threatened his business. As the reality of the situation sank in, Stan couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. Meanwhile, Riley was at her home, trying to come to terms with the loss of her family. Suddenly, a man appeared at her doorstep, offering her money in exchange for her silence. He glanced at her medicine, but before he could take it, Riley snatched it back and chased him away, returning the money he had offered. As the days passed, Riley prepared to testify in court, hoping to see justice served for her family's murder. However, as she sat in the courtroom, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Suddenly, it hit her, the man who had come to her home was the defendant's attorney. The injustice didn't stop there. After Riley gave her testimony, the defense lawyer tried to discredit her, claiming that her memory was impaired due to a head wound, rendering her testimony unreliable. Riley couldn't believe that the trial had been manipulated and that the judge had not given her the justice she deserved. To her dismay, the judge released the defendants, citing a lack of sufficient evidence to convict them. Enraged by the decision, Riley lost control and was subdued by the police. As she was being taken away in an ambulance, she struck Stan with an oxygen cylinder and fled the scene. Soon after, Moses and Stan attended Chris's funeral, searching for Riley in the crowd, but to their disappointment, they were unable to find her. In the present, Stan and Moses arrived at the scene of a grisly murder. At a carnival venue, they found the bodies of 3 men hanging above a merry-go-round. To their shock, they recognized the men as the suspects who killed Chris and his daughter 5 years ago. At the FBI office, Agent Lisa Illman was hard at work when Agent Lee walked in. He reported a gun theft that had been committed by a woman and showed her a CCTV recording of the perpetrator's face. To her surprise, it was Riley. Without hesitation, she sprang into action. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, Stan and Moses examined the evidence when Stan received a phone call from Lisa. Meanwhile, having treated her wound, Riley was back in the field, weapon in hand. As Stan and Moses arrived at the FBI office, they were greeted by Agent Lisa. She explained the multiple cases involving Riley and showed them CCTV footage of her stealing several firearms. Meanwhile, Riley had tracked down the corrupt judge who had rigged her case. She had tied him up and driven nails into his hands. After leaving the judge's house, she detonated a bomb she had placed on his desk, causing an explosion that killed the retired judge. As the news of the explosion reached Stan, he received a phone call confirming the event and the judge's death. The situation was dire, and they knew they had to act fast to catch Riley before she could cause more harm. Elsewhere, Cortez arrived at Garcia's hideout with dire news. He revealed that Riley, a dangerous rival in the criminal underworld, had killed the judge they had bribed 5 years ago. Hearing that, Garcia's face twisted with anger, and he instructed Cortez to put a hit out on her, offering a substantial reward for her capture or death. Shortly after, Garcia had a tense conversation with his friend Ortega. Ortega expressed his frustration with Garcia as their drug shipments had gone missing twice in 1 week. Garcia brushed it off as a misunderstanding, but he was not convinced. He warned Garcia that he was just a small-time drug dealer compared to the likes of Cortez. As the scene shifted, we saw Riley on a bus. She was handing out toys to a little girl whose father was an alcoholic. As the girl's father went downstairs to buy more alcohol, Riley pointed a gun at the man's mouth. She warned him to put his daughter's happiness first before he left. Sometimes later, Riley determined to track down a man named Marvin, disguised herself as a scavenger, and infiltrated the building where Marvin was hiding. But her cover was quickly blown when she was intercepted by 2 guards, whom she swiftly eliminated. As she made her way deeper into the building, she was caught peeking through a crack in a door, and an intense firefight erupted. Despite being outnumbered, Riley took out her opponents one by one, leaving only Marvin alive. Shaken by the attack, Marvin went to Garcia to report the incident. Garcia, furious, demanded to know if Riley had taken any money. He sheepishly admitted that she hadn't taken anything but had instead burned all of their cash. Garcia, realizing the gravity of the situation, ordered Cortez to increase security measures before Riley could strike again. Meanwhile, news of Riley's daring raid spread like wildfire and was reported on all local news stations. On the other hand, the police arrived at the crime scene where Garcia had been laundering his illegal money. Then Moses pointed out the location to his partner Stan, but the 2 men were quickly at odds. He accused Stan of being distracted by his feelings for Lisa. Just as their argument reached a boiling point, Lisa arrived on the scene, curious about the department's progress on the case. Stan, eager to prove himself to her, offered to take her to the department headquarters. Meanwhile, Garcia was reeling from losing his trusted associate, Marvin, and was frantically trying to figure out how Riley had known about his whereabouts. Then Cortez thought that she might have been following them. In a fury, Garcia devised a deadly trap to kill her. As all this was happening, Riley was meticulously planning her assault on Garcia's base. Meanwhile, Stan and Lisa, utilizing advanced surveillance equipment, tracked her movements via satellite. Returning to Riley, she cautiously entered Garcia's base, but instead of finding the criminal mastermind, she stumbled upon a trap meant to kill her. Quickly realizing the danger, she turned to flee the building, but she was spotted by one of Garcia's henchmen. Without hesitation, he detonated the explosives, reducing the building to rubble. Meanwhile, Lisa and Stan received word of an explosion at a warehouse and rushed to the scene. As they arrived, they were met with chaos and destruction. Then Lisa immediately left to investigate further, while Stan was contacted by Moses, who informed him that the warehouse was one of Garcia's known hideouts. Riley, who had managed to escape the explosion by hiding in an underground aqueduct, emerged from the waterway and commandeered a passing car. She raced after the vehicle of Garcia's men, determined to take down the criminal organization once and for all. As she chased after them, Garcia received a call from his men, who reported that Riley had been killed in the blast, much to his relief. While Lisa was hunting for Riley's hideout, she ventured into a slum area and approached a homeless man for information. The man told her about an angel who lived in the area, piquing her interest. Meanwhile, Riley had finally caught up with Garcia's men. She ambushed their vehicle as they drove down a deserted road, killing them all. At home, Garcia saw a news report on television about a carjacking and recognized the stolen vehicle as belonging to his men. As the car belonging to his men drove up to his house, the guards opened the gate but were immediately shot by Riley, who had followed the car. Knowing that Riley was closing in, Garcia ordered the lights to be turned off and his men to take positions. Then she methodically made her way through the house, taking out anyone in her path. Eventually, she found Garcia and cornered him. But as she was about to deliver the final blow, her attention was caught by Garcia's daughter, who reminded her of her own daughter, allowing Garcia to counterattack and stab her. As the police arrived at the scene of the crime, Riley made a hasty retreat. She made her way to Peg's house and tied her up, taking a moment to tend to her wounds before interrogating her about the wedding ring. But when Peg responded rudely, Riley aimed her weapon at her. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, Moses was informed by a fellow officer that the house belonged to a company, but he insisted that it had to be Garcia's. He approached Officer Barker, questioning why he hadn't told Stan about the connection to Garcia. But Barker claimed that he had told Stan twice, causing Moses to become suspicious of Stan's motives. As Stan was canvassing a seedy neighborhood, he ran into Lisa, who showed him a black van filled with illegal guns. There she revealed that she had been investigating Riley and Garcia for a long time and intended to take them down. She also mentioned that the rumors of a corrupt cop working with Garcia were true. In a shocking turn of events, Stan, who had been working with Garcia all along, suddenly shot and killed Lisa. With her knowledge of Garcia's operations, she posed a threat to his criminal empire. Then he got rid of his weapon and called Garcia, revealing Riley's hiding spot. Soon after, Garcia and his men quickly headed to the slum area, splitting up to search for Riley. But despite her exhaustion and the pain from her wound, Riley was alert and ready for a fight. She used the environment to her advantage, causing a vault to fall and crush one of Garcia's men. Then Riley obtained a radio used by Garcia's men and radioed Garcia, ordering him to turn himself in or she would kill all his men. But Garcia, unfazed by her bluff, refused to surrender. As she searched the area, she heard a cell phone ringing in the trash. She opened the box and found the body of Lisa. Shortly after, Riley snatched Lisa's phone and immediately went live, revealing to the world that Stan was a corrupt cop working alongside Garcia. In her broadcast, she also revealed where she and Garcia's team hid. Not long after, the police quickly rushed to the scene, but they were met with a shocking sight. Garcia had taken a young girl hostage and threatened to kill her if Riley didn't reveal herself. Faced with this dire situation, she had no choice but to come out of hiding and surrender to his demands. When Riley revealed herself to Garcia, the corrupt cop didn't hesitate to unleash a brutal beating on her. Despite the pain, she remained determined and continued to provoke Garcia, buying time for the police to arrive. As the sound of sirens drew closer, Garcia and his men panicked and prepared to flee. In a fit of betrayal, Garcia turned his gun on Stan and shot him before making a run for it. However, Riley managed to intercept him and, fueled by a burning desire for revenge, delivered a beating of her own. With Garcia on the ground, helpless and at his mercy, Riley aimed her gun at the man responsible for her family's death. Just as she was about to pull the trigger, Moses and the other officers arrived on the scene, pleading with Riley not to take the shot. But at that moment, consumed by rage and a desire for justice, she pulled the trigger and Garcia was no more. The police, in turn, fired at Riley, hitting her in the shoulder. But even injured, she managed to escape the scene. The following day, Moses stumbled upon Riley at her husband's grave, her eyes red from tears and her body racked with pain. Without hesitation, he knew she needed medical attention and rushed her to the nearest hospital. As they waited for her treatment, news reports flooded the television, announcing that the entire town was rallying behind Riley, even though she was being charged with murder. Despite the outpouring of support, the legal system moved forward, and Riley's trial was set to begin. But as the days passed, Riley found solace in the visits from Moses. He would come to her bedside, holding her hand and reminding her that she had done what was necessary to bring justice to the city. With the help of Riley's bravery, the city's largest drug mafia was dismantled, and countless criminals were brought to justice. As the film closes, we see Moses visiting Riley one last time. He leaned in close, whispered words of encouragement, and, with a smile, slipped a key into her hand. The key to the handcuffs that had been binding her symbolizes that Riley had earned her freedom after all she had been through. The moral message that we can learn from this film is the dangers of assuming that everything is as it seems. The judge in the trial of Riley and Stan, who initially appeared to be a fair and impartial figure, ultimately revealed himself working with the corrupt Garcia. This twist serves as a powerful reminder that we must always question and examine the true motives of those in positions of power.